In 10 years, what does the future of Solana look like? Today, I speak to Solana expert and strategy at the Solana Foundation, Austin Federa,
Solana is designed to be the fastest system you can possibly build.
about the future of the fifth largest crypto,
And that's before we look at updates like the Firedancer program, which is aiming to 100x the network from its current capacity.
I ask him about Ethereum, thoughts on the Ethereum ETF. Does Solana need an ETF, or do you see it getting an ETF? About artificial intelligence and Solana. Near Protocol seems to be branding themselves as the L1 for AI. How do you feel about that, and what does AI look like for Solana main chain? And watch today's whole video because I ask Austin the tough questions. Outages on Solana. Why do they happen? Why do they still happen in 2024? There was one. Hit the like button if you appreciate these conversations. And Austin, let's start with your background.
Yeah, I have a pretty non-traditional background for someone who now works for a blockchain foundation. I originally went to school for political science and environmental science and economics, and then spent the first kind of 2 or 3 years out of school actually working in public media. Both at NPR and other member stations in that sort of public media network. And then found myself up in Boston and really got the startup bug. And so I went to work for my first startup, was there about a year and a half or so, and then moved to New York to join a fintech company. And that company was, I would say, rapidly failing, which I wasn't necessarily aware of when I joined it. But one of their last ditch efforts, and this was in kind of mid 2017, was to try and build something on blockchain. So they were trying to build a borrow lend token on Ethereum way before anyone really had a mass idea concept of what DeFi might be. That company, ended up failing. It didn't really go anywhere, but that really got me bit with the crypto bug. And so I've been working in blockchain ever since.
And why Solana? Why did you choose Solana?
Yeah, so I was working at Bison Trails up until their acquisition by Coinbase, and a whole bunch of the work I'd been doing at the time was to help the product and platform team on their ETH2 staking infrastructure rollout. This is back when we were just launching the Beacon chain, and the idea was it was going to be a sharded ecosystem of, up to 1,000 different shards, all running on the base L1. I just decided joining Coinbase post-acquisition probably wasn't the right thing for me. Coinbase is an incredible company, but I just didn't think it would be right for the kind of next step I wanted to make in my career. And I was talking with a bunch of L2s and other protocols, and I hadn't really talked to anyone at Solana Labs or the Solana Foundation, but two guys I used to work with at Republic back in the day actually had joined the Solana Labs team, and they're like, you should go talk to Raj and Anatoly. They're doing some really cool stuff. And I was like, I don't know, we worked with like 20, 30 different protocols at Bison Trails. I never talked to anyone at Solana. Like, what's interesting over there? And you got to remember, this is the very end of 2020 now. So Solana had been live for about 9 months at that point. And they were like, you should just get on the phone with them. They're super smart people. Like, maybe it's a fit, maybe it's not. And one of the first sort of questions I asked Anatoly was some version of, hey, I've been doing a bunch of work here at Bison Trails on the Ethereum 2 infrastructure support. I don't understand how DeFi is going to work in a sharded ecosystem. Liquidity is all about concentration. How are you going to be able to transact atomically across different shards? And he was like, "Oh yeah, they're totally wrong. We're building things totally different here on Solana. It's building in one global state machine with all the atomic composability that the original Ethereum design had in it." He's like, I think, the market's going one way. This is not the consensus bet by any means, but this is what we think is right. And my thinking was, I wasn't clairvoyant. I wasn't like, oh, this is going to be the third largest protocol in the world. But I was like, this is a really credible, interesting take on how you can build stuff differently. And at the very least, I will learn a ton working here and working under these folks. And that was, a little over 3.5 years ago. So.
Uh, I believe a lot of new people are going to be onboarded into crypto this year, the next 5 years. For somebody who has never heard of Solana, maybe even in relation to Bitcoin and Ethereum, what is Solana?
Yeah, so Solana is a globally decentralized blockchain protocol that's built for mass adoption and scale. And those are two words that I think if you're coming from a Web 2 background, you take for granted. Everything in Web 2 is built for scale. You just throw more AWS credits at it and scale solves itself. That is not the case in blockchain. And so one of the things that I think we found very early working on the Solana project was that a lot of the developers in 2021 and 2022 that were coming over and building on the network, this was their first time building in blockchain because they looked around, they said, I know how to build a startup in the Web 2 world where we don't have to worry about resource constraints. We don't have to worry about transaction capacity. And so they found that Solana was actually the best place for them to build because it shared a lot of those characteristics that made the sort of Web 2 enterprises so popular and so easy to build on at the time. And so that was one of the main, I would say, advantages in the early days the network had. Now, fast and scalable is a little bit more of a commodity than it was back in the day. There's several fast blockchains nowadays that all offer, fairly high transaction capacity and, fairly fast finality. But back in 2021, Solana was really the only game in town for that. And so that was where a lot of that original adoption came from. The network's in a very different place today. People choose Solana for a whole slew of technical reasons when they do intense diligence, like Visa, when they chose Solana last year as sort of the place to scale their USDC pilot, that was entirely based on the merits of the technology stack. But the community now is, probably the second or third largest community in blockchain. And that has become an increasing reason why people decide to build on Solana for the network effect and for the community.
How is Solana different than a Cardano or Polkadot? Because they both have been more scaled than Ethereum. Those were known to be the Ethereum killers, with co-founders of Ethereum starting their own projects.
Yeah.
What's the difference today?
So I don't think Solana really should be considered an Ethereum killer. There's nothing in the Solana architecture that is really setting itself up to kill Ethereum. I mean, for starters, we don't even have EVM compatibility on the network. So if we are trying to kill Ethereum, EVM compatibility would have probably been a good thing to include. Solana really is an execution layer play. It is based on the idea that we need open competitive markets where every market participant has the same level of access as everyone else. And the thesis really is that's only possible in one global state machine. That is actually fully compatible with the Ethereum and Bitcoin view of the world. If you want Bitcoin as your settlement layer for all of eternity, if you want Ethereum as your settlement layer for all eternity, you can actually still get that, but you should be transacting in the cheapest, fastest, highest throughput market you can. And that is really the value proposition of Solana. There's sort of the left curve, right curve, meme going around all the time. And you can think of it as on one extreme, you have, something like Bitcoin, which is pure utility, pure settlement, pure store of value. On the other side, there's something that's, fully executional, like Solana. And, there's a whole middle ground of protocols in the middle that have picked a different point on that curve as to which thing they're optimizing for. But Solana's real design decisions are all focused on execution speed and execution capacity.
If Tim Cook or anybody from Apple comes to you and they say, hey, I really want to know why maybe we should build on Solana versus a Cardano, is it more scalable? Does that hold true?
I'm going to be honest, that's not a question that we are often asked. It is certainly more scalable. Solana today has the highest transaction capacity of any network, and that's before we look at updates like the Firedancer program, which is aiming to 100x the network from its current capacity. The goal of that project over the next 3 years is to hit 1 million transactions per second. That's the goal. We'll see what they actually, are able to get to. But Firedancer is on testnet now, and so what we are seeing is this new validator client with this new networking stack put in it. It is extremely performant in these environments. And so, what we sometimes people look at Solana and they're sort of like, oh, they've scaled, and it's like, no, 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 this is just the beginning. Scaling is never done. Scaling is a consistent project. It's not a one and done activity.
Firedancer is slated to come by the end of this year, I believe. If slash when that happens, that 100x in scale you were speaking about, what does that allow you to do, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line?
Yeah, so I think it's important also to note. So Firedancer, they're targeting to ship the version. It's called Frankendancer because there's the networking stack is the main new component that's coming to mainnet. Their goal is to ship that by the end of December. I think they're very likely to sort of hit that goal. Day one, you will not see, a massive spike in transaction capacity on the network because even though all these systems are now built for much higher capacity and throughput, there's other things in the protocol that have to be adjusted. The CU limit, for example, taps out at, I think, about 80,000 transactions per second with the current CU limit. Now, that's something that can just be raised by a protocol governance vote, but what you'll probably see is a steady increase in transaction capacity over sort of the 6 months after Firedancer starts to ship, as we sort of test the limits of what this new version of the network is able to do. And in terms of like what is the scale you need on sort of a multi-year time horizon, what we're really looking at here is trying to build a base layer network that is capable of handling all the world's market information. That's a very lofty multi-year ambition. But what we see is every time there is a step function change in cost or availability, new types of applications get built that we never imagined, right? The 2G iPhone to the 3G iPhone was the difference between, 45 seconds to load a Wikipedia page and Tinder, right? Like that change in bandwidth, that change in response time opened up an entirely new class of products that weren't previously possible before. You couldn't build Uber on 2G internet. You can suddenly build Uber on 3G internet, let alone kind of the stuff we have today. And so, people often ask me, what do we need this scale for? And the answer is, I don't entirely know. I don't think anyone has a concrete vision of this is exactly what we need a million TPS to be able to do. The beauty is to give developers access to a million TPS and see what crazy things they come up with.
Do you see the New York Stock Exchange, for example, being tokenized on the Solana blockchain?
Yeah, I think those are exactly the type of use cases that this is really getting built out to support. Now, there's this whole bunch of regulatory issues to get through before something like that could happen. But from a technology standpoint, that is the sort of vision of Solana. Right now in the United States, there are several different exchanges, right? The New York, the CME exchange. Those are not integrated exchanges. Those are isolated trading venues that, yes, have lots of piping between them, but the execution is done in these particular environments. Now, you could see a world where suddenly there are central limit order book style exchanges, which there are on Solana, that are handling, equities and commodities and all sorts of different types of asset classes. And a trader in Singapore has no disadvantage compared to a trader in New York. And that is right now, that's not the case. Companies spend tens of millions of dollars a year to have a computer physically located in the stock exchange data center because it's faster and better access. The whole promise of blockchain is universal access anywhere in the world. And so that is really what that long-term vision is can we have a network that can handle the volume of transactions needed to run something like the New York Stock Exchange or 10 New York Stock Exchanges without the sort of location primacy and centralization that comes with the current centralized exchange models.
Austin, I want to throw you a curveball. I'm sure nobody's asked you this in this last week, but thoughts on the Ethereum ETF?
It's awesome to see. Seriously, like the work that the Bitcoin community did over the last 10 years to hammer through and eventually get an ETF approved was huge. The work that the Ethereum community has done to get the first proof of stake ETF approved, it's one of those real celebratory moments for the entire industry to come together around.
Do you think that precedent just helps in a non-direct way for other DApp platforms like Solana? And does Solana need an ETF, or do you see it getting an ETF?
I certainly hope so. I have no, inside information on if or when that would be. It's not like, the regulators would talk to us about something like that anyway. They'd be talking directly to the companies that would actually be issuing something like an ETF. But it seems likely to me that this is something we'll start to see a lot more of, that a number of different proof of stake networks are going to be able to get these type of regulated financial products created in this, what seems to be a pretty dramatic change in how the SEC is looking at this stuff. This is great for investors too, right? Like this is a thing I think that people forget is for, folks like us who are Web3 native and are very comfortable with self-custody and hardware wallets. An ETF isn't really that exciting to us. We can already, buy our Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana and self-custody and keep ourselves safe. But for most investors, that is just simply not something that they're able or willing to do. They either buy crypto and they hold it on exchanges. And, exchanges are great, but every once in a while something like FTX happens. And so if we had had highly regulated ETFs in the United States, the damage from something like an FTX fallout may have been way lower because the majority of these sort of less sophisticated retail buyers might be buying in something like an ETF vehicle, which has all of the regulatory safeguards and protection as a gold ETF or any other type of exchange traded product has. And so, I think that's a really big unlock for the industry. It's really great for consumer protection as well, and it can actually make it easier for, folks who have retirement accounts to get access to the potential of crypto.
What has changed for Solana in 2024, specifically ecosystem wise? Like what's being built? What are you excited about?
So much. So I'll say that, this has been sort of one of those like intense growth years for the network. So a huge amount has changed on the underlying network technology stack, and that has unlocked a lot of different types of use cases as well. So some of this was the end of 2023, but Jito and Jupiter really coming out on the scene. That's been really a big moment for the network where folks are able to see the trading performance of a network like Solana and being able to go there with Jupiter and Phoenix and all these other DeFi products. I've been really interested in looking at the work that Helium has been doing in terms of building, a cell phone network that is a decentralized physical infrastructure network. I think they just flipped over where now more than 50% of the data that's being used on the Helium network is actually being served by Helium hotspots as opposed to their fallback telecommunications partners. So that's really exciting to see. And sort of the work on meme coins obviously has been one of the big things that I think has taken the internet by storm in terms of Solana meme coin activity. So, it's really great to see communities galvanizing around meme coins and kind of having fun on blockchain again.
Something that wasn't on my 2024 crypto bingo sheet was obviously meme coins blew up on the Solana ecosystem. But what I saw is that every other major L1 ecosystem then started. They were proud of their meme coins. They wanted to talk about the community being built on there. Did that surprise you?
I mean, there is this thing in crypto where there's a lot of narrative chasing. So whatever happens on one network, someone sort of says "me too" and tries to do it somewhere else as well. That's always been a part of crypto, right? We had this with all the Uniswap clones back in 21 and 20 that popped up, and so all the meme coin clones that have popped up. It feels reminiscent of that. But meme coins are great for networks. I mean, they are a very low cost stress test of a bunch of components that you've maybe never had a chance to stress test before. Like someone launched a proof of work token on Solana. Who would do that? Why would they do that? Well, it helped optimize the network for a bunch of different types of use cases now. So memes are really communities in early formation, and the meme coins that are successful, and it's a very few percentage of them, but it's a few of them. They graduate into maybe a whole new status. Maybe we should call things like Doge and Bonk and Shiba and even Bitcoin, community tokens. They're no longer meme tokens. They've sort of hit escape velocity, for lack of a better term.
Do you see the US government adopting the Solana blockchain? And if yes, what ways could they do that?
I think it's too early to say, would a government in the United States adopt any specific type of blockchain technology? I mean, we've seen California have some experiments with a closed fork of Tezos for, I think it's their driver's license registry or motor vehicle registry, which is really exciting to see. What I'll say is like, when we have conversations with folks in DC or folks who are talking to folks in DC, government is very interested in blockchain. They're starting to understand that US dollar stablecoins are really an important part of maintaining US dollar dominance over the international landscape. And if we don't make it easy for people to be able to send money and businesses to be able to send money anywhere in the world, in 1 second of finality or less for a fraction of a penny, we're going to lose out to other countries that are building those type of technologies. Now, I don't think a central bank digital currency is maybe the way it's going to get done in the United States, but if we have good stablecoin legislation, that would basically have the ability to have a stablecoin treated as good as cash with the same securities that you'd get on a money market fund or any other type of good as cash product, this could be a really big unlock for the U.S. economy. And I think folks in D.C. are really finally starting to take notice of this, especially as we're seeing more trade competition heat up internationally. I mean, T+1 settlement or even the 8 hours it takes a wire transfer to clear, that's a meaningful amount of time for many businesses.
Like you said earlier, Ethereum, Solana is not an Ethereum killer. You guys are growing together. Different people are adopting you. The cream is rising to the top in the crypto space in general as the space grows. But no denying, Solana ecosystem is killing it. Do you see Solana surpassing Ethereum
I think we have to define what surpassing means.
in market cap?
Uh, who knows? I think if I could make accurate predictions on crypto prices, I would have a yacht by now. Um, but what I'll say is like the Solana ecosystem has been growing tremendously, as you said. There's no signs of that slowing down. Uh, that being said, Solana does not need to flip the market cap of Ethereum for Solana to be an incredibly vibrant, productive, and incredible network that has, the highest users of any blockchain. The pie is truly big enough for all of us, and the pie is also, I will remind folks, tiny today. A very small fraction of the world has used blockchain or transacts on blockchain every week. There's so much growth left for this industry as a whole. I am not focused, folks at the Solana Foundation are not focused on sort of the relative position in the charts of these things. It really is about the long-term technology vision and doing what we can to move towards a future where more things are powered by blockchain.
I love that. I love that. And this interview is being released while consensus is happening. You're going to be at consensus. Are you guys going to, Solana has a presence there or just attending?
Yeah, there's a bunch of us from the foundation and a few folks from Solana Labs going down. Raj, the co-founder of Solana, will be speaking on the main stage at Consensus. I have a fun modular versus monolithic debate I'm doing with one of the Celestia co-founders. And then there's a bunch of other people talking about other initiatives on Solana elsewhere as well. I think Shiraz is talking a lot about payments and stablecoin adoption on the network. He runs a lot of the finance and payment work here at the foundation as well. And lots of engineers will be in town. So plenty of people to talk with.
I'm glad I didn't know you were doing a debate on modularity. I think you said with Celestia. That's
Yes.
I want to. That's why I asked you like the Cardano question earlier, not to like pit anybody against each other because the quality ones are growing together. But like, what is the difference between Solana and what these other blockchains are doing? Now, I'm an average retail investor. I'm not a tech guy, so we can't go too deep. But like, I remember somebody asked this to Charles Hoskinson once, like, why before ETH 2, why is Cardano better than ETH 2? ETH 2 is going to solve everything. And one of the things he brought up was composability. It's just easier to be more seamless on the blockchain. I was like, oh, okay, cool. That's a big difference. So what other differences are there with Solana?
Yeah, I mean, that is what the one global state design of Solana really is designed to enable. So, if you go back to the early days of Ethereum 1, right, your sort of typical L1, 14 to 21 transactions per second, but you could have a transaction that would take a flash loan off of a collateral, trade it through one market, trade it through another market, trade it through another market, and actually pay back that loan within the exact same transaction. That is atomic composability. That is the holy grail for composability in blockchain. And today, that is only possible if you are running in the same state. So if you're trying to do an atomic transaction, you cannot do an atomic transaction between one L2 and another L2, or even between two different L1s because they operate in different states. So if it takes, let's just say, 1 or 2 seconds to do a transaction from one network to another, there's no guarantee that the state of that second network will be the same by the time the transaction gets there. Maybe, and just the most boring classic example, the NFT you're trying to buy got bought by someone else, or the market price moved out of your slippage tolerance range. And so composability is one of the key features of a network like Solana. Solana can also do, it does steady state about 4,000 transactions per second at this point. So, it's that combination of single global state, high composability, high transaction throughput, and 400 millisecond block finality also allows the network to just move at a pace that is much faster than other networks out there today. And so
And you
that's
think
really good for DeFi. It's really good for all sorts of other types of applications too.
And you think that's better than modularity?
It's different. So I'll say for a lot of types of applications, it is better, right? I think the there's really no one honest in the modular side who would say that, modular inherently is better from a composability perspective because it's just simply not. Now, there's a lot of other reasons you might want a modular design system, right? And one of them might be you just don't believe that systems that are not modular can scale. And, that is maybe a philosophical position that someone has, and, time will tell. I think I'm very confident in Solana's ability to scale over time. It's proven that so far. It's continuing to prove that into the future. But that's one reason that someone might say, oh, I think we need a different approach here. So I think it's going to be a good conversation.
For sure, for sure. And speaking of different L1s, just doing different things, at least branding wise, doing different things, Near Protocol seems to be branding themselves as the L1 for AI. How do you feel about that? And what does AI look like for Solana main chain?
Yeah, I mean, there have been a number of AI projects on Solana for, I think, over a year at this point. So, Cuzco is an LLM training model system built on Solana. IONet is a distributed GPU for AI training on Solana. The Render Network, which originally started on Ethereum, is actually migrated to Solana, and they do everything from video rendering for, like HBO TV show opening, kind of high quality renderings to actually the ability to do some AI workloads now on the render model as well. So, AI and blockchain, it's one of those things where I think it's still slightly looking for product market fit. It's not fully there yet, but there's a lot of areas where I think blockchain can solve or at least supplement a lot of the training data problems, the model problems, the sort of provability of outcome problems that AI is having. But I sometimes you hear sort of this idea that like from the blockchain people that like AI needs blockchain. And I'm not sure how true that is today. You don't hear the AI people saying, "Oh, we really need blockchain." And so every time it's going one way, there's always a question of like, is this a narrative someone's trying to push, or is this real? And I think time will tell from that perspective. But I think there's no doubt that AI will be an important component of all of these blockchain networks over the long term.
Couple more questions, then I'll let you go.
Sure.
In 10 years, what does the future of Solana look like?
10 years. So this may happen earlier than 10 years, but let me give you that kind of long-term vision. So multiple concurrent block producers around the world. So right now there's one leader at a time that produces blocks on Solana. This is the same as really every other network at this point. But Solana's long-term vision is actually the ability to have two validators in different parts of the world concurrently produce a block. And then in execution, because we have this thing called proof of history, where every transaction that comes in effectively has a timestamp on exactly when it was accepted by the validator network. You can then kind of take these two concurrent blocks, zip them together using those proof of history ticks, and execute blocks in order in this one sort of streaming transaction set. And so over time, the goal is to have 2, 4, 8, 16 multiple concurrent block producers. So the shortest distance between you and a validator might be as low as 50 milliseconds anywhere in the world at any given moment. And so at that point, markets on Solana will move just as fast as the traditional financial markets, potentially even faster. And so you'll see, some news happens in one part of the world, the market reacts in functionally real time. And that is really the long-term power and vision of the Solana network. 10 years out, we might be looking at, several million transactions per second of capacity. The network of that, let's call that what, 2034 would look very different than the Solana network of today.
Um, I know this Firedancer is going to solve this, but outages on Solana, why do they happen? Why do they still happen in 2024? There was one, and
Yeah.
what are your thoughts?
So there's two answers for why outages still happen. And at the most base level, outages happen because there is one client right now. And when that client encounters a problem, it is designed to halt, right? There are other networks that just continue processing and sort of hope it can get fixed later, where they have massive reorgs where it rewrites, 48 hours of chain history, as we've seen on some L2s and L3s. Um, that is just not necessarily the most responsible decision to make. And so when the network gets into a place where for whatever reason it's not able to resolve a conflict, it stops and it says, all right, validator network, it's time for some manual intervention here. Um, and so that is kind of why the outages occur. Now they're occurring much less frequently than they used to. But part of this is also a trade-off in terms of how quickly can you build new features, how quickly can you ship new software versus how heavily are you focusing on stability. And so that uh ratio, for lack of a better term, changed maybe a year and a half ago or so, where the sort of pace of rapid fire development was pulled back a little bit, and there's a little bit more focus on stability from the core teams that are working on the network. And what we've seen is that the outages are much less frequent and the downtime is less when an outage does occur. So having a second independent client will actually help with the resiliency of the network. There is no sort of magic bullet here, though. Solana is designed to be the fastest system you can possibly build, and in order to achieve that, at times, there may still be outages into the future. Now, the goal is 100% uptime for all the validator operators and all these core folks building the network. But if we looked back and said, in 3 years from now, maybe there hasn't been a single Solana outage, but the network still has about the same transaction capacity as it does today. I think if you polled most developers and users, they would say that's not a good trade-off. And that is the trade-off that many other networks have made. They fundamentally haven't scaled to additional capacity. And maybe that's not entirely because they've chosen that sort of uptime over performance. But we have to remember in the early days, AWS used to go down all the time. It doesn't anymore. These things hit a certain maturity and scale where systems start to adapt. People start, all the bugs are found, for lack of a better term. The operators are getting more professional in what their operating principles are and how they manage these types of things. And so over time, it is a problem that should fix itself.
Austin, I appreciate you sharing your time, man. Links for you, Solana, down below in the video description. I really do feel I have such a better understanding of one of the main players in cryptocurrency today. So thank you. Final thoughts for the Altcoin Daily audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. If you haven't tried Solana, go download a wallet. Phantom's pretty popular. Solflare is pretty popular, and just try transacting on the network. I think people often feel like it's cheating. It feels as snappy and responsive as a Web 2 experience, and for many people, that is sort of a game changer for them to experience.